You're listening to Real Life, No Filter, where raw emotions and real moments take center stage. No masks, no filters. Just honest stories about life, love, and everything in between. Get comfortable. We're about to begin. Eleanor adored her son David, seeing him as the main reward of her life. She loved her daughter Clara differently, coldly and distantly, for Clara had grown up independent and strong, not needing maternal care. The mother's heart didn't ache for Clara's fate. All her worries and hopes were focused on David. David, although a successful man, remained a child in his mother's eyes, incapable of surviving without her constant control. This was a profound delusion, but Eleanor refused to acknowledge it. No matter how David tried to loosen the tight threads of his mother's care, he couldn't. In the end, he resigned himself, learning to navigate under constant supervision, sometimes burdensome, but familiar since childhood. Real difficulties arose when David decided to get married. Sarah was already the third girl he had introduced to his mother with serious intentions. The previous two had fallen victim to her total control, unable to withstand the pressure and breaking off the relationship before marriage. Sarah possessed amazing patience and calmness. David honestly told her about all his mother's peculiarities and warned her that they would have to live together. "You don't choose your parents, Davy," she replied with understanding. "I'll try to find common ground. She gave you life, and that's what matters." Sarah didn't yet imagine how refined Eleanor's nitpicking could be and how much it could poison existence. Ahead was the first meeting with her future mother-in-law, who was not supposed to know about the engagement yet. Anxiety gripped Sarah, because her happiness with the man she loved was at stake. She prepared meticulously, learning about his mother's tastes and dislikes from David. Mentally, Sarah was ready for the meeting, but the anxiety still wouldn't let go. She baked Eleanor's favorite Medovic cake, dressed up, and waited for David. He arrived with a bouquet of flowers, picked her up, and they went to his house. Eleanor was also preparing for the reception, but her mood was far from welcoming. Even without seeing Sarah, she had already decided she wouldn't like the girl. In her mind, no one but a mother could truly love and care for David. She was sure of her own exceptionalism. The mother met them in the hallway, dressed smartly and with light makeup, radiating outward geniality. But Sarah instantly felt the coldness and rejection emanating from her. For the first time in her life, she felt so acutely that she was not welcome here. However, Sarah was not used to retreating and was ready to endure the trial for David's sake. During dinner, Eleanor asked standard questions about her family, education, work, housing. Sarah answered calmly and confidently. She had things to be proud of. She grew up in a good intellectual family. Her father was a colonel, her mother a surgeon. Sarah herself had a medical education and successfully worked as a gastroenterologist in a prestigious clinic. Sarah's story made an impression on Eleanor. The previous candidates for the role of daughter-in-law were much simpler: a nail technician, a boutique salesperson. She liked that Sarah came from a respectable family, was educated and well-mannered. She might even have praised her if Sarah hadn't been vying for the most sacred thing, the place next to her son. Overall, the evening passed without obvious scandals. David drove Sarah home and returned, knowing that a serious conversation with his mother was unavoidable. She was waiting for him in the living room, and from her tense look, it was clear Sarah had still not pleased her. David mentally prepared to defend his choice. "Mum, what is it? Something wrong again? What didn't you like about Sarah?" David didn't delay, immediately going on the offensive. His mother pretended to be surprised by the question. Why did you decide she didn't please me? Quite a nice girl, educated, cultured, pleasant to talk to. But, David said, knowing there would definitely be a but. But there's definitely a but, isn't there? His mother picked up. Yes, if it weren't for one but, I think she's boring. Eleanor delivered the most absurd complaint. David even laughed at the ridiculousness. Mum, are you serious? Boring? Why did you decide that? I don't know. It just seemed that way to me, his mother replied evasively, clearly not having found a better reason for dissatisfaction. How will you live with her? Have you thought about that? I'll live perfectly well with her, Mom, David replied confidently. Stop looking for a black cat in a dark room, especially since it's not there. Sarah is a very good girl, calm, well-mannered, cultured, exactly the kind you dreamed of for me. He walked over to his mother and took her hands. Listen, I'm 32 years old. I want a family and children. How much longer do I have to choose? Eleanor understood that her son was right. It was high time he had his own life. But she so didn't want to share him with anyone. Even the thought of grandchildren didn't soften her heart. In her world, only her son existed. You're right, son. It's time for you to get married. She began her usual song. It just seems to me that you're still a very small boy who needs his mother and her care more than anything in the world. But you've grown up, and your mother is no longer needed. Mom, don't talk nonsense, David interrupted her. I'll always need you, and we'll live with you. I'm not going anywhere. We'll still talk, have dinner together, go shopping, go to the dasha. It's just that one more person will appear in our house, and in time, maybe more than one. He looked at her hopefully. It's much more fun that way, and you won't be alone when I go on business trips. Eleanor couldn't bear his gaze. She had never been able to refuse her darling, her Davy. All right, get married, she finally said, giving in. I won't interfere. Mum, I knew you were the wisest woman in the world. David hugged and kissed her, triumphant. 2 months later, Sarah and David got married, and she moved into her husband's house. The first few weeks passed surprisingly smoothly. Sarah couldn't even believe such an idyll. Eleanor was benevolent, chatted nicely with her daughter-in-law, and even helped her with household chores. But as soon as David left for a week-long business trip, everything changed. Complaints poured down like from a horn of plenty. You're not ironing David's shirts correctly. You didn't put enough salt in the soup. You put too much salt in the porridge. You put the cups in the wrong place. You can't sit in that armchair. That's David's armchair. All members of our family know that. Sarah didn't understand how a person could change so drastically, but she silently endured, correcting all her mistakes. The real nightmare began when Sarah brought home a small kitten. David had told her they always had cats, and Sarah hoped the fluffy baby would soften the atmosphere. She had cleared the purchase with her husband, and he was happy with the idea. But Eleanor thought differently. Why did you bring this flea-ridden thing into the house? Do you know I can't stand cat hair? You're doing this to spite me. She exploded. And that's when Sarah's patience snapped. Dear Eleanor, what are you trying to achieve? She asked calmly but firmly. Do you want David and me to divorce? That's not going to happen. We love each other. I cleared the purchase of the kitten with your son, and he assured me that you always had cats in the house and that you would like this idea. Sarah continued. But it turns out you're ready to contradict even that, just because I brought the kitten. Sarah looked at her mother-in-law without fear. The only thing you will achieve with this attitude towards me is that we will move into a rented apartment, and you will be left alone. Does that option suit you? I don't think so. So either we live peacefully with you, or we leave. Sarah laid down the condition. You can't count on us separating. I'm expecting a baby. Eleanor looked at her daughter-in-law with completely different eyes. So, you have character after all, girl. Want to fight with me? Well, well, she thought to herself. But aloud, she said something different. I don't want you to go live somewhere else, she said, softening. Maybe I am being a little critical of you, but you must understand me. I'm a mother. I want my son's happiness. Sarah replied, And do you think I appeared in his life to ruin it? Have I given you any reason to think so badly of me? No. Eleanor turned to leave, but then turned back to her daughter-in-law. All right, let's live peacefully, she agreed, especially since you shouldn't be stressed. After this conversation, the relationship truly began to change. Eleanor stopped picking on Sarah over trifles, tried to spend more time in her room, interacting less with her daughter-in-law. Sarah noticed that the kitten, whom she named Jasper, became a frequent guest in her mother-in-law's room. She picked him up even more often than Sarah herself did. Life in the house gradually improved. 2 years passed. Sarah and David had a son, whom they named Edward, after David's father. His father had been a policeman and died in the line of duty. Eleanor always remembered her husband fondly, while David barely remembered his father, having lost him at the age of 4. Little Eddie grew up, and his grandmother enjoyed spending time with him. She played with her grandson, went for walks, while Sarah was busy with household chores. Eleanor's attitude towards her daughter-in-law hadn't changed drastically. She still disliked her, but now she did so silently. David worked a lot and often went on business trips. Their life flowed calmly and measuredly. But, as often happens, unforeseen circumstances burst into their quiet family harbour. David had to leave for a month-long business trip to another country. Sarah really didn't want him to go, but there was no choice. The trip was necessary. A couple of days after he left, Sarah noticed that Eleanor was behaving strangely. She was silent, didn't play with her grandson, and looked depressed. Gathering her courage, Sarah decided to talk to her mother-in-law. Eleanor, is something bothering you? Sarah asked uncertainly. Maybe something hurts. Tell me, I'm a doctor. Her mother-in-law answered calmly. Nothing hurts. Everything is fine. But Sarah didn't believe her and decided to look more closely. The next day, Sarah accidentally overheard Eleanor talking on the phone, asking for help. Sarah didn't understand exactly what it was about, but she clearly heard the words, "I need your support." Eleanor had many acquaintances and relatives, but she could only ask her closest ones for such help. Sarah felt uneasy. She immediately called David. Davy, you need to talk to Mom urgently. Something is happening with her, and she's not telling me anything. I heard her asking for help on the phone, but I didn't understand what kind. You talk to her. Maybe something is wrong with her health? I can help. David replied. Okay, Sarah dear. I'll definitely talk to her today. And in general, how are things with you? Oh, it's all right, Sarah replied. It's just your mom isn't herself. It's making me anxious. David understood her concern. I understand, he said. I'll call you tonight after I talk to her. In the evening, David called back and reported that his mother's test results were bad. The doctor at the clinic insisted on urgent surgery, and his mother was very scared. Sarah, dear, Try talking to her again, David asked. I asked Mom to at least show you the test results. She seemed to agree. But show her care and attention. You know how she is. For my sake, of course. Sarah replied, Davy, I'm worried about her myself. I'll do everything I can. She walked resolutely into her mother-in-law's room. Eleanor, I understand that you dislike me and think I'm a bad daughter-in-law, but please allow me to help you anyway. And then something Sarah hadn't expected at all happened. Eleanor began to weep bitterly. Sarah was even frightened. Eleanor, what is it? Is it that bad? Is it cancer? She asked with alarm. No, her mother-in-law replied through tears. It's just that I turned to my daughter. She doesn't have time to go to hospitals with me. But that's understandable. I always only focused on David. She has reason to resent me. My sister is also busy with her own affairs and problems. My godmother and best friend are at the dacha. They won't come to the city for my sake, they say. You have children. And it turns out no one cares about me. She looked at Sarah with despair. And I'm scared, you understand? Very scared. All right, let's calm down, Sarah said firmly, switching into doctor mode. You'll tell me everything in detail. Eleanor showed her the test results, explaining that the doctor insisted on immediate surgery, claiming that time had been lost and the outcome was unclear. Sarah studied the results carefully, then looked at her mother-in-law in surprise. Which clinic were you at? Our District 1? Sarah asked. I don't see anything terrible, let alone irreparable, in your tests. I'll call my gynecologist right now, and we'll go for a consultation tomorrow. I'm sure this is some kind of mistake. Eleanor looked at her hopefully. Really? She whispered. Really? Sarah confirmed confidently. The next day, Sarah and Eleanor went to the medical center where Sarah worked, to her acquaintance, a gynecologist. The doctor listened carefully to the complaints, studied the tests, and was extremely surprised by the district doctor's recommendation for surgery. Eleanor, I assure you, you have no indication for surgery, he said. I will prescribe you treatment, you'll undergo it, and everything will be fine. Eleanor cried again, this time from relief. Leaving the center, Eleanor stopped, took Sarah's hand, and said, Sarah, dear, please forgive me. I was very unhappy. I picked on you for no reason. I am guilty before you. Tears welled up in her eyes again. And you turned out to be the only person who came to my aid. She looked at Sarah with deep gratitude. Because if I had gone to the doctor with anyone else, they would have sent me for surgery. No one would have bothered to investigate. Thank you, my girl. Thank you so much. I promise you, I will be the most loving mother-in-law in the world. Sarah also cried, completely not expecting such words and confessions from her mother-in-law. It's all right, Eleanor, she said through tears. We are one family and should help and support each other. Eleanor smiled sadly. In life, it's often the opposite. Strangers support and help, while your own are too busy, she remarked. Well, then we're the exception to the rule. Sarah smiled, trying to lighten the mood. Let's go home. Eddie is waiting for us there with my mum. Suddenly, Eleanor stopped abruptly and looked at her daughter-in-law with determination. Now you listen to me. Just don't interrupt, she said. I want to thank you not just with words, but with actions, so you see that I've changed. She squeezed Sarah's hand. I'll sign over my share of the apartment to you, so you and Davy are always on equal footing, Eleanor announced. That will be fair? Sarah tried to object, but her mother-in-law interrupted her in a playfully strict tone. All right, don't argue with me. she said. On this matter, I will be categorical, strict, as a mother-in-law should be. She smiled and hugged her daughter-in-law tightly.